I'd like to invite Devanshi to introduce Dr. Abhijit Dam. You've seen in all the pictures, you saw white people or, not much Indian thing in that. So now we are going to get an Indian perspective and welcome Devanshi. Devanshi is a second year MBBS student and her hobbies are reading and writing. And she wants to be a neurologist in the future. And she wants to connect, something about like the book that Dr. Abhijit Dam released now. She's interested in, neurology and quantum physics and everything like that. Over to you, Devanshi.
Good morning, everyone. It is with great honor and privilege that I stand before you today to introduce a truly exceptional individual, someone whose dedication and compassion have touched the lives of many. He is a distinguished palliative care specialist. Initially, he dedicated himself to critical care medicine. However, over a decade, he witnessed the paradox of technology extending death rather than preserving life, leading to undignified and painful end of life experiences. This realization spurred his transition to palliative medicine. In 2004, he initiated palliative care services in rural tribal community in Jharkhand. His innovative approach involved training village women to become palliative and geriatric aides, adapting to resource-poor settings with locally accessible and affordable solutions. As the Secretary of Indian Association of Palliative Care, he notably led the organization from a rural setting. He further integrated various medical streams into palliative care, founding the National Association of Palliative Care for Ayush and Integrative Medicine. He is a celebrated author. His books, including The Lost Foods of India, Food and Spirituality, and his latest publication, Does the Moon Exist?, delve into the integrate connections between food, spirituality, and the end-of-life experiences. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Abhijit Dam.
Good morning, everybody. And I hope that after the coffee break, you're feeling a bit better. So just take 10 seconds of your time and think of 3 diseases which are non-infective and of non-surgical origin, which has a cure. 10 seconds. 3 diseases, give me examples of any 3 diseases, non-infective causes, non-surgical causes, which has a cure. Time up? Almost? So with all the modern technology that you have gone through today and in your lives, so where do we stand? Where does medical technology actually stand? What have we achieved over the last 200 years or maybe 250 years? I'm sure there are examples of diseases which have a cure, but you really have to think very hard. What modern medicine definitely has given us, that it has made the process of dying more expensive, more lonely, more prolonged, more painful, undignified. Just have a look at this lady, a widow with CA cervix. She had severe pain, which we treated very well. So currently she has no pain. Take it for example that she is alive. She is not. So she has no pain, but she can't sleep at night. So her son keeps on coming to us and tells her, look, my mom can't sleep. So what would be your line of approach? What would you do? How would you, help her to sleep in a better fashion? What would you do? Sleeping pills, great. Anything else? See, this is what I want to address. That our whole MBBS curriculum, our whole way, the way that we have been taught is deranged somewhere. Yeah, that coming from a very senior doctor. So by the time we learn our ropes, we are already, past 50 at least. So what you need to do is go down to her house. And this was the cause why she couldn't sleep. Flies. So just spending 100 rupees, giving her a mosquito net, and she could sleep beautifully. So this is where we are lacking. We just look at the results nowadays. We treat values, pharmacological values. We don't treat patients anymore. That this lady is an individual with her own needs, with her emotions, and every human being is unique. We can't have algorithms for, everything, drop-down algorithm. So we need to individualize. We need to understand suffering. We need to go down to their houses. Home visits are very important. The last days of our life, this is something which is hardly addressed, because somehow the modern medical teaching sees death as a failure. Is death really a failure? Death, as I look at death is physiology. I don't look at death as a pathology. We all have to die, isn't it? So nobody exactly dies in their sleep. There, if you look at death, there has to be some medical cause of death. But overall, if you look at it, death is physiology. So the last days of our life may be some of our most significant, providing opportunities, to create memories, give final gifts, so on and so forth. So if you ever think of the fact that how would you really like to, spend the last days of your life? Now, if you consider me to be Yamraj, and I tell you that you are going to die after 3 days, so you just have 3 days to live. So what would you do? Your time starts now. You want to sit back here, listen to me blabbering, or you want to do something else? You just have 3 days. What do you want to do about it? So think of it that way. And if you have thought of so many things, then why aren't you doing them right now? What is the guarantee that you won't really die after 3 days? Dying is the most important event after birth. And it is not just a physical phenomenon. Are you happy to die in a hospital? But you choose otherwise for your patients, because they are patients for you. They are not human beings. They are not individuals. When your relative gets an admission in a hospital, how would you look at that relative at that point of time? That is what makes the difference. So palliative care, basically, it affirms life. Palliative care is not here to kill people. It affirms life, regards dying as a normal process, as something physiology. It's physiology. We all have to die anyway. It neither hastens or delays death, so on and so forth. And now if you go back, the way our ancient rishis in the Vedas, which the 6 phases, they described it, that asti, the moment when the embryo is conceived, asti, then jayate, when the child is born, then vardhate, it grows up, viparanimate, it matures, then apekshiyate, it starts, degenerating, and then vinashayati, where the body finally collapses and goes away. And then they say, jatasya hi dhruva mrityu, whichever is born has to end. Whichever thing has a beginning has to have an end. Very simple logic. But then with our scientific rigor, we want to interfere very much. And too much interference results in issues. End of life care. Now, what really do we mean by it? The GMC defines it as approaching the end of life as when a person is likely to die within the next 12 months. So there is something called the surprise question. If you look at any person and if you think that, would this person actually live for the next 3 months also? So that itself means that this person has approached or is qualified to go into end of life care. ICMR has a different definition. So why, I mean, do we really need palliative care? Death is inevitable, but suffering is not. Suffering is not compulsory. We all have to die, but that doesn't mean that we have to suffer and die. Right? And if you now look at dying, death from the point of quantum physics. Now, quantum physics, there are many in this room who are very of a scientific mentality and who refuse to accept Vedas and all those things. If you want science, now science, quantum physics actually says that we don't die. You know, Albert Einstein, once he was walking down the Institute of Advanced Learning in Princeton, and he was asking this question that do you really think that the moon ceases to exist if we don't look at it? And that's why I wrote the book, Does the Moon Really Exist? And the answer is actually yes. The moon stops to exist if you do not look at it. And this is what quantum physics calls the observer effect. You bring things into reality the moment you observe it. And if you go back to the ancient theory which was propounded by Adi Guru Shankaracharya, the whole concept of Maya, now quantum physics is accepting those principles. So we need to understand and respect our lineages also. Now, what is this consciousness? So if we die, do we really die? No. It is only our physical body which is dying. Something is surviving. And what is that thing which is surviving? This is what modern science calls it, consciousness. Where does this consciousness originate? Well, Hameroff, he is an anesthetist. So he said that it exists in the neurons, in the lamina 5, in the microtubules. This is a postulate, of course. So quantum physics goes further to say that this is something called the Swiss cheese model, that we are all interconnected. Like in Vedanta, they say there is one, universal Brahman, and we are all connected to the universal Brahman. And this is something which is being explained by this Swiss cheese model. I won't delve into the details of this, otherwise you will call me crazy then. And how did Vedanta define consciousness? Stula Shukshma Karana Sharirat Vyatirikta Panchakoshatita San Avastha Traya Sakshi Sachitananda Swarupa Santishtati Sa Atma. I won't go into the details. This itself is a 2-hour lecture. But then this is how consciousness was defined by Vedanta. I'll skip this also. So, if you understand the role of curative treatment in life-limiting illness, you will see that it's very less. Because after all, death, if you regard death as physiology, then somehow physiology shouldn't be interfered with very much, right? So, whenever you're trying to preserve life, so-called preserve life, think whether you're actually preserving life or are you prolonging the process of dying? Are you prolonging suffering or are you preserving life? How would you like to be, treated if you were in the place of the patient? Put yourself in the place of the patient and then understand. So end of life is the neglected core business of medicine, and this came up in the Lancet in 2012. So how do you diagnose dying? It's not possible to predict with certainty, and there is a reluctance on part of the medical profession to diagnose dying because death is often seen as a failure. But then, as you, there are so many other markers. As you enter the terminal phase, the patient becomes weaker and, eating or drinking less. They become more stuporous. They appear to be sleeping. And that is where we go and start pinching those patients, waking them up. Please don't do that. Because dying requires a lot of concentration. And then this was this beautiful study done by Lichter and Hunt. In the last 48 hours of life, what were the symptoms in a series of 200 patients? So 56% had noisy and moist breathing, means difficulty with breathing. 53% had urinary dysfunction, means they passed urine in their beds, they couldn't control their urine. 51% had pain. What does all this mean? This means that basically every alternate person sitting in this room before death will either have dyspnea, every alternate guy will be either dying in pain, or there will be a loss of dignity where you will be wetting yourself. So are you ready for that? And this was another study showing correlation with quality of life and the place of death. Right? So they found that if you want to die with a good quality of life, with physical comfort and psychological well-being, nothing like home. And a close second was home with hospice care. The ICU was the worst place to die. And that is where most of us are going to die. And all of you who have a very good health insurance policy, be assured that you'll die in an ICU. Are you ready for that? So dying in an ICU, or dying at home, this is home with hospice care. This is our hospice in rural Jharkhand. Or dying at home. This is my favorite picture. This lady who is quietly dying, her daughter-in-law is giving her the last few sips of water. Her husband is there in that dhoti, standing back, and the rays of light this was in winter. You can see the streams of light coming in. Beautiful way of dying. But then we don't see such deaths anymore in our modern society. So our ancestors had, said that I think time is up. But anyway, what I basically want to tell you is that we need to normalize the process of death and dying. Instead of making it more technologically savvy, because that way you will just be prolonging the process of dying, making it more painful, less dignified, more expensive also. Thank you. I think I'll end here.
I'm Akshata Singh. I'm a third year MBBS student from MGMCRI, sir. Sir, I just really want to know your take in legalizing euthanasia in India, because it's a very debatable situation over here. And according to the Constitution, in Article 21, it's said that you don't have a right to die. So that's the reason passive euthanasia is allowed and the other is not. So what's your take on that, sir?
At the beginning of my career in palliative medicine, way back in 2004, and that is how most of our of the teachers out here in India were telling us, talking to us in those in those lines, basically, that euthanasia is not palliative care, and so on and so forth. But over the years, as I've grown older, this is my personal view, I do support euthanasia because, suicide, it's a way of suicide, of committing suicide. When does a person think of suicide? A normal person wouldn't just think of killing himself just like that. But then I think there would be a large percentage of people in this room who would have contemplated killing themselves at some point of time. Those thoughts might have come in. You have not put it into action, that's a different story. But then I look at suicide as a way of regaining control over your own self. That is how a person who commits suicide looks at it. That, okay, I can't control my circumstances. My circumstances have overwhelmed me, and at the least control which I have is on my own body. So that is how even patients perceive it. it is not only the physical symptoms which go out of hand, it is the suffering, because pain and suffering are two different things. So when suffering goes out of hand, that is when people contemplate, killing themselves in a desperate attempt to regain some control, some dignity back. So it is not just about killing yourself, but because at the end of the day, you really don't die. So your consciousness persists in the universe. Whether you like it or not, it does happen. So that's my personal take on it. And as far as passive euthanasia is concerned, it is very much legalized, but the whole process, getting the permissions in order, getting the medical board in order, that is so time taking that it basically makes the whole process so much cumbersome.
I am Devanshi, second year MBBS student from MGMCRI. Sir, my question to you is, how do you deal with the grief of losing the patient which comes with the kind of work that you do?
See, you can't deal with grief. Number one, by saying that, what I mean is that grief is inevitable and grief cannot be healed. It can be regressed. It is something like, hypertension. Hypertension, you can't like essential hypertension, you can't have a magical bullet to cure essential hypertension. As long as you are on drug therapy, it is under control. The moment you stop drug therapy, it will, gradually come back, sort of. So grief is something like that. That loss is always there. You can take away the huge symptoms by various things, by pharmacological therapy, non-pharmacological therapy and all that. But then the grief, somewhere or the other, it is always there. And then the challenge is in how you can make a stepping stone of that grief to succeed. So that is all about, that is the challenge. How you can turn your suffering into a challenge to evolve. So that is how I look at it.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Abhijit Bhattaradhakrishnan here. Yesterday, I was shocked to read a news item saying that India has the highest number of suicides compared to the rest of the world. Again, Indian doctors seem to have the highest number of suicides again as compared to the world. But my question is, you see patients who, towards the end of life, how many of them want to live longer? How many of them want to die? What do they express to you that, Dr. Saab, I should go? Or I make me live. What is I always understand that the older you are, the longer you want to live.
Yeah, this stems from the basic root of attachment. The older we get, the more greedier we become in terms of attachment to our dwindling treasures. And the most important dwindling treasure is our physical body. The more tightly you hold on to sand, the more quicker it disappears. So the whole thing stems from attachment. So here we can't have a truly medical perspective, a modern medical perspective for treatment of this. What is needed out here is a spiritual and a psychological way of looking at things and understanding things. And the day you start understanding things like the way quantum physics is explaining things now, that you really never die, that is such a huge sustainer of hope, that even after your physical body goes away, your consciousness will persist. And there are so many examples. There are so many lakhs and lakhs of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, end-of-life dreams and visions. You can't just rubbish them away. So there has to be some meaning, and there is a lot of work to be done in those fields. So that itself is such a huge hope-giving strategy. So it doesn't always have to end up in suicides because there is still hope. Yes, sir.
Which is, the end of life, the fellow thinks that he has had enough, there is no treatment, nothing is there. So he stops eating, stops drinking, water, and slowly the body goes. Actually, Acharya Vinoba Bhai practiced this because he found that so there must be lots of things which prepares the mind for this. In fact, Hindu mythology, you have Duryodhan who practiced this, tried to practice, but he was talked out of it by other people when he suffered a humiliating defeat. That's what the Mahabharata says. But this sort of a thing which the end of life and how to end that life, which is an end of life, you have to really prepare the patient with this. This is one of the glorifying methods of ending life.
Uh, Actually, it's my. I just want to say that regarding uh, grief cannot be done away with, or it is not possible to completely relieved of grief. I would like to take a different opinion of it, because the question is, if all of us know the difference or the meaning of life and death, everybody over here in the crowd would become another enlightened Buddha. Okay, so but people perceive like many of the books and all which I have read, and I was deep into it, that those just near death scenario, people suddenly see a enlightenment or flashlight at the end of the means big tunnel, and they said the whole life flash into within the few microsecond and all this thing. But me myself facing very close to the death and come out of it, I never had. There was a momentary despair, but then the only thing I felt that how many people I have caused harm by my words. Can I, that small amount of, even if I live for few days, can I say sorry to them and say I'm those kind of thing. So if you are facing death, that or committing suicide, that is an extreme step when people don't see there is any hope. It is not, the absence of hope is a very torturing thing. It's not the death itself. The moment you lose hope in your life, that's the end of it. So even you live for 10, 100 days, 10 days, 10 years, if you lose your hope, that is the actual death. I don't think anything is worse than that. So providing relief to a person that don't worry, we are there with you. I mean, gypsies and all, again, they hardly face any kind of illness. And even if they face illness, they become very all right, because all the community come together when they are ill and they say we are there. So if you can provide that the person a terminal illness that we are there for you, the patient will, that person will go even at the end of the life with a lot of happiness and without any kind of torture and suffering.
That's very true. And our modern society has alienated the process of dying. That is how our ancestors used to die, at home, surrounded by the whole family members, like I showed in the slides. Dying in hospital, home with hospice, and dying at home. But sadly, that is not happening anymore. Today's youngsters are bereft of death. They are scared of death because they have never seen death at home. So somewhere we are losing out. So it's time to actually bring back those focus back in. Look at death as something physiological rather than, pathological.
Good morning, sir. I'm Dr. Ilavarisi. I'm a medical oncologist by profession. We, in Indian society, we do not discuss how we want to die. What is our will? Like, do I want to die in a hospital or in a home? We find it very uncomfortable discussing this at home. The same happens among our medical profession. The family physician do not discuss it. The specialist find it very difficult. Like you said, we still see death as in failure. like referring to a palliative physician or a hospice specialist as a failure in our part. What do you think should be the change in our medical fraternity to help patient reach, get palliated well before like it is before they suffer? Because a small example in lung cancer, it has been proven like giving palliative right before improves their survival, improves their quality of life. It's just not in malignancies, happens in refractory heart failure, CKD patients, neurology cases. So what do you think should be the change in our medical fraternity to make this available for a patient?
See, people, it's not that the doctors in India are not aware as to when to refer their patients to a palliative care physician, but they don't want to. In private practice, they will not do that. Economics comes in, right? So,
Patient asks the question, what else can I do? What else? I think I always tell them you're asking the wrong questions. You should be asking, what should I do? Not because what can I do? Oh my God, I've got this armamentarium of monoclonal antibodies, which will never end. You know, every year a new one gets added. So I think we need to have that thing in.
No, the idea of referring the patient to a palliative care, itself makes the patient to realize that he is beyond cure. Now, stressing them into palliation along with the family members, it stresses both of them, along with whatever you said, economics also. So basically, you see, palliation, just because you have a center, you have to refer to that. No, they can go home and die peacefully there.
Yeah.
And regarding the second point you said, the youngsters don't see the death and all, they have not realized. But a natural death which happens in the house will have more stress than when you are anticipating somebody with a disease. There you have already accepted the thing that this can happen. A natural death really gives a shock, and especially youngsters if they lose their kith and kin or parents. So there is a difference between natural and somebody deceased who end up afterwards.
That
I would
is what-
beg to differ on those points. The first point, as you said, sir, that taking away hope. Taking away hope is not exactly true, but you're giving them false hope is criminal. If you're giving them false hope and saying that no, I'm here, I will cure you, that is criminal, because false hope will destroy not only the patient but the whole family, because then they will sell everything, and at the end of the day they will lose everything. And second is this natural death. Natural death is such a slow process. What you're talking of maybe is sudden deaths, like somebody dying of acute MI or of a massive stroke or something.
Yeah,
That
those
is
are all
or of
happen in
an
the
accident.
house.
So
Those are the things which happen in the house.
fine. An elderly person dying at home over a protracted period of time, that because you're seeing a gradual deterioration over
That's
time.
a different issue.
Huh.
I'm saying sudden death.
So that is a
Ah,
different
that is where
trajectory of
the
death.
difference
That's
comes.
that's a different trajectory of death.
Yeah.
Those sudden deaths.
So
Right?
that
That
will
can be
have
shocking.
really sort of impact on the youngsters
Hmm.
than somebody after a prolonged period of this thing.
But then at the end of the day, those youngsters will become adults. Everybody has to be exposed to the fabric of life.
Yeah.
The fabric of life, nature can be very brutal at times.
Regarding the first point of meeting the palliative physician at the end, that's why it is recommended to involve them quite before we reach that point, so that the patient feels that we all are a team. Rather than if we refer them at the end, patient would feel the doctor has ditched me, I'm done. Like there's no other, they will have the sense of dejection. So it is recommended, especially in my field, like to involve palliative physician quite early in the picture.
Right
so
from the
that
point
patient-
of diagnosis.
Exactly. So that the patient feels like they are part of my treating team. Only thing is the percentage of me spending with the particular physician would change.
Thank you so much. When we chose this topic, I the intention was just to give an idea, but I'm so glad we chose it because it's brought people across age groups and specialities together. And thank you, Dr. Abhijit Dam, for coming despite his not feeling well. And all it needed was one WhatsApp message, and then he said, I am there. And he has to change flights, train, all that to travel. It's not like me driving down from Chennai. So thank you so much, Abhijit, and thank you everyone for making this session so participatory. Can request Devanshi to hand over the memento to Dr. Abhijit Dam.